بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد عليه أفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم. First, I'd like to thank all pediatricians, my colleague, for attending this webinar. In special thanks to Eva Pharma Company and all its team for sponsoring this highly scientific meeting. Also, special thanks to all team of Egyptian Academy of Pediatric and Egyptian Scientific Society of Pediatric and Neonatology and Quartz Event Solution for their great effort in the scientific and the technical organization of this webinar. It's my honor to be as a moderator on this great webinar that brings together two figures in the field of pediatrics and the pediatric gastroenterology and nutrition. Professor Hania and Professor Mostafa Elhodhod. Let me first introduce our first speaker, Professor Hania. Professor Hania is a professor and chair of Department of Pediatrics at Medical University of Warsaw. He served as editor-in-chief of Journal of Pediatric Gastroenterology and Nutrition. Professor Szajewska serves as a member of the counseling and then as a general secretary of ESPGHAN. Now she is a board of director in the International Scientific Association for Probiotic and Prebiotic. Professor Hania will speak today about Antiemetic in children acute gastroenteritis, to give or not to give. Professor Hania with us. Professor Hania.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Hello. Welcome to the webinar and welcome to Egypt. Yeah. As a virtual.
You know that I have never been to Egypt.
I am pleasure and all we are pleasure to meet you.
It's my pleasure. I really
the floor to you now. The floor to you.
I really appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I will now open my presentation. I hope it will work. You know, there are always problems with this kind of things. Can you see my presentation now?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Yes.
It means
you can go.
I'm not very good. Well, I will work on it.
You can.
Yes, now it should be okay.
Yes, share screen. Yeah, okay. I see it. I see it. Yeah. Yes, but.
Okay. Can you see it now?
Not the. Yes. Okay. You can go. Thank you.
Okay, so now you can see it. So I hope everyone can see it. So once again, thanks a lot. Thank you very much for this kind invitation. I wish I could come to Egypt. You invited me a number of occasions and I never managed to come. So it's a pleasure to be with you at least this way. So welcome and thanks for joining for this webinar on antiemetics in children with acute gastroenteritis, to use or not to use. Here's a picture of myself. This is how I look. And as you already mentioned, I am a member of the ESPGHAN, and I also collaborate with the International Scientific Association for Probiotics and Prebiotics. And I'm really pleased that you joined for this webinar in these unprecedented times. And these are really unprecedented times. 5 months ago, no one knew that SARS-CoV-2 existed, that COVID-19 existed. And now the virus has spread to almost every country, to your country, to Egypt, to my country, to Poland. And we are practicing, you know, social distancing, so we behave completely differently, we work differently. But please don't forget microbes other than SARS-CoV-2. And please don't forget people with conditions other than COVID-19. And that's why today, in my presentation, I would like to cover the topic antiemetics in children with acute gastroenteritis, to use or not to use. And there will be 3 questions that I would like to cover. Is acute gastroenteritis still a problem? Is vomiting during acute gastroenteritis a problem? And finally, antiemetic in children with acute gastroenteritis, to use or not to use. And in my presentation, I will cover current guidelines. There is a lot of those current guidelines. I will not cover all of them. I'm just showing you some of the examples. And I had the privilege to contribute to the ESPGHAN guidelines on the management of acute gastroenteritis, which are now, which will be very soon updated. And there are other recommendations. There's also a very recent paper, which I had the privilege to collaborate to on acute gastroenteritis in children of the world, what needs to be done. And this was a paper developed by ESPGHAN, Federation of International Scientific Association for Probiotics, for Pediatric Gastroenterology, Hepatology, and Nutrition. And we were aiming to present it at the World Congress in Copenhagen, but unfortunately, the Congress, for obvious reasons, will not take place. Anyway, let me start with the terminology. We are using two terms, acute diarrhea, acute gastroenteritis, are used interchangeably. Both terms are describing the same disease, a gastrointestinal infection caused by specific microorganisms. And I will, in my presentation, like in the literature, use those terms interchangeably, but they really mean exactly the same. The first question which I'm asking is diarrhea still a problem? And the answer is yes, it is a problem. If you look at the data, 2015, but unfortunately nothing has changed. 1 out of 10 childhood deaths were due to diarrhea. This is mainly in low and middle income countries. And it means 500,000 of childhood deaths per year. And it means why childhood deaths per 60 seconds, 60 deaths per hour. So if we will have this conversation here, this meeting for an hour, 60 children below the age of 5 are likely to die. It's also a problem in a high-income country. For example, in most of the European countries, it's up to 2 episodes per child per year in children below 3 years of age. In low and middle income countries, it can be 4 to 5 episodes per child per year. So this is really a problem. If you look at the etiology, rotavirus is still the most frequent agent of acute gastroenteritis. However, it depends what is a country. Since the introduction of rotavirus vaccines, norovirus has become leading cause of medically attended acute gastroenteritis. This data are from US, from United States, but we know that it applies to many other countries. So its coverage is very high for rotavirus vaccine. The norovirus may be the number 1. And what is also important on this slide is that in half of the cases, we don't know, with all the testings that we have worldwide in the research laboratories, etc. In half of the cases, we will not know what is etiology. What is new in 2020, and of course, we cannot avoid speaking about SARS-CoV-2 and about COVID-2 and 19, and this is one of a very recent publication in gastroenterology showing that patients with COVID-19 not only have respiratory symptoms, but also gastrointestinal symptoms. And if you look at, and these are data for adults and for children, there is no difference between children and adults. Anorexia, 27%, diarrhea, the one which we are discussing, 12%, nausea and vomiting, 10%, abdominal pain, 9%. So it's not only respiratory symptoms, also gastrointestinal symptoms. And what is also important, that virus RNA was detected in stool samples, and the positivity for SARS-CoV-2 was in 48%, in almost half of the cases. What is the meaning of that? This is a potential that shows that the potential transmission risk via fecal-oral route. So not only respiratory route, but also fecal-oral route. Okay, what is the management of acute diarrhea in 2020? Because this is important for our discussion today. And if you look at the guidelines, and I showed you some of the guidelines, there's consensus in all of the guidelines. It's rehydration and early refeeding with an age-appropriate diet. This is what should be done as a first stage. Very briefly, few comments on rehydration, oral and enteral or intravenous. And oral rehydration is, of course, the key treatment. This comes from JAMA paper published 2 years ago, because 2 years ago, there was a 50-year perspective. 52 years ago, for the first time, oral rehydration therapy was successfully used in the refugee camp in Bangladesh. And since then, oral rehydration therapy remains a mainstay of treatment for diarrhea worldwide for both adults and children, and can be used by parents at home as well as in clinics and hospitals. This comes from this opinion piece, which was published in JAMA, as I already told you, 2 years ago. Why is possible? Of course, you know that the water is absorbed from the bowel lumen only in the presence of electrolytes, and especially of sodium. I will not go into the detail. I will just remind you that this mechanism, the coupled transport of sodium and glucose across the intestinal branch border, is a key mechanism, and it remains intact. We can use it when giving oral rehydration, when introducing oral rehydration solution. Some people are saying, I like this cover from the Time magazine already a few years, probably almost 20 years old. Water with sugar and salt. Of course, this is not what we are giving at the moment. We are giving professionally prepared oral rehydration solution. This is recommendations from the ESPGHAN. I like what comes from the Lancet, one of the greatest achievements of medical research in the 20th century. When I'm telling you now about 500,000 of deaths in children below 5 years of age, it's a lot. But before the introduction of oral rehydration solution, in the late 70s, early 80s, it was almost 4.55 million deaths. So this is really tremendous achievement. And frankly speaking, I'm surprised that people who discovered the mechanism and then introduce oral rehydration solutions, they really deserve Nobel Prize. And I'm surprised they never got it. Huge achievement. When it comes to details, reduced osmolarity oral rehydration solution is recommended as a first-line treatment of acute gastroenteritis. In case of cholera, slightly higher concentration of sodium, because there are huge losses of sodium. In children who fail an oral rehydration, an administration of rehydration fluids either by nasogastric tube or intravenously is effective and should be recommended. Just a short comment for nasogastric tube. It comes already from the 2014 recommendations from ESPGHAN. When we finalized these recommendations, I came back to my department and I told my colleagues, let's introduce nasogastric rehydration instead of intravenous rehydration. And I can tell you 6 years later, we did not succeed. I mean, there is such a expectation on the part of parents and also of the medical staff to give intravenously, if not orally, that we failed with nasogastric tube. But I know that some of my colleagues, especially in Scandinavian countries, they're quite successful. So it probably depends on the country, but it's really very effective when you look at the literature. And IV rehydration should be avoided where possible in severely malnourished children. This comes from very recent universal guidelines developed by ESPGHAN. Okay, so this was a few comments on rehydration. Now, nutrition. Nutrition, breastfed infants to continue or to stop breastfeeding. And of course, you know the answer. And the answer is continue breastfeeding. And what is really important, and again, all the guidelines are very consistent. Early refeeding with an age-appropriate diet is recommended. Children should be refed early during the course of acute gastroenteritis, and it should be introduced not later than 4 to 6 hours. Some people are even saying 3 to 4 hours after the onset of rehydration. And there was a randomized controlled trial also carried out with some of our colleagues from Egypt, which was coordinated by ESPGHAN many years ago, which also confirmed this routine. There is a lot of discussion about the lactose-free formula, and I know the next talk is also about lactose. When you look at the recommendations, lactose-free formula is generally not necessary in acute gastroenteritis episodes. However, Lactose-restricted diets may be considered in hospitalized children and in children with prolonged diarrhea, prolonged which means more than 7 days. When we were developing our ESPGHAN guidelines, there was a lot of discussion about that, but there was a Cochrane review which was showing that indeed in hospitalized children, it really makes a difference. Reduction in the duration by diarrhea by approximately 1 day. Lactose-free formula should be recommended in children with chronic diarrhea, which means those with duration longer than 14 days. So this was for rehydration, this was for nutrition. Now let me move to another part, which is pharmacotherapy. And there are some problems why we are using antidiarrheal drugs. And this is why it very much relates to oral rehydration solution, which we may underuse despite the proven efficacy. And the reason is that oral rehydration solution does not reduce vomiting, does not reduce frequency of bowel movements, does not reduce fluid loss and duration of illness. And as a consequence, there is interest in safe, effective, and inexpensive agent as an additional treatment to stop vomiting and to stop diarrhea. And I'm sure in your country, like in my country, people do not want to, parents especially, do not want just to rely on rehydration and nutrition, they want something else. And let me comment, and I will start with antidiarrheal drugs, and then I will go to antiemetics. If you look at antidiarrheal drugs to be considered in the management of acute gastroenteritis, I summarize them in alphabetical order, and I will comment on each one of them. And these antidiarrheal drugs to be considered include probiotics with documented efficacy, racecadotril, smectite, and I will comment also on zinc. So let me start with probiotics, what the guidelines say. If you look at the guidelines, you see the green color. Yes, ESPGHAN, ESPIC 2014, US guidelines, yes, universal developed by ESPGHAN very recently also are saying yes. And usually they say probiotics with documented efficacy. Some of them are providing which strain should be used. American guidelines are saying that you should find specific recommendation through search of the literature or the manufacturer recommendations. I want to make it slightly easier for you and also to show you something new. And this has updated ESPGHAN guidelines on the use of probiotics. They are now in print. I think they should be published. They should be available online within the next 2-3 days. And there are probiotics with documented efficacy, Lactobacillus GG, Saccharomyces boulardii, Lactobacillus reuteri, and Lactobacillus rhamnosus, Lactobacillus reuteri. All these numbers and letters are important because they are like a passport, like an ID for the probiotic. These are conditional recommendations, weak recommendation with low to very low certainty of evidence. And in our ESPGHAN guidelines, we also stated which probiotics should not be used. For one of them, it's a strong recommendation. For another one, it's a weak recommendation. So again, it's not any probiotic, but probiotics with proven efficacy. Racecadotril, which is anti-secretory drug, and what the guidelines say, ESPGHAN and universal, by ESPGHAN say yes, ESPGHAN says no, and American guidelines are saying it reduces stool volume, but it's not available in North America. It's not available, then you cannot really recommend. That's absolutely clear. Why it's not recommended, why there's discrepancy, as you can see, there were the universal guidelines are really very much focused also to low-income country or medium-income country, and they are saying we want to focus on something which is really absolutely necessary. So they do really want to reduce as much as possible the use of any additional drugs. Smectite, it is exactly the same, and in American guidelines not addressed because the smectite, which is adsorbent drug, is not available. ESPGHAN is saying may be considered, and universal guidelines exactly as the same as for racecadotril. Zinc, there's an interesting story. There's a good rationale for using zinc, and what the guidelines say. They are saying consistently yes, yes, yes in children above 6 months of age and in developing countries or in countries where there is a baseline zinc deficiency, like the risk for the baseline zinc deficiency. And this is important to be considered. So for the European population, which usually there is no problem with zinc deficiency, we do not recommend, but so only in some setting. In America, it's exactly, I mean, only if you have not a universal recommendation, but only if there are signs of zinc deficiency, and universal ESPGHAN, yes. So not as a routine in some setting, and also in children above 6 months of age, because it has not been shown in clinical studies that there is some effect in younger children. And what I would like to comment or to remind you that it's always as an adjunct to rehydration therapy. It's never instead of rehydration therapy. So probiotics only with documented efficacy, on resveratrol in some settings, smectides in some settings, and zinc in some settings. And I commented on it. Now let me move to antiemetics, which is really the topic of my presentation today. Clinical scenario, you see, let's say, 4-year-old girl which presents with diarrhea and 3 episodes of vomiting in the last 24 hours. The child has signs of mild dehydration, a diagnosis of gastroenteritis is made. You are concerned about ensuring the child takes enough fluids and wonder whether an antiemetic is a good choice. I think this is a clinical scenario that many people, many physicians, many pediatricians do encounter such a situation, and this really to use or not to use antiemetics. And the consideration is that vomiting may impair oral rehydration, which is really a mainstay of the treatment. And considerations are that interrupting emesis will likely help with rehydration therapy. Antiemetics are usually used with the intent to decreasing the rate of dehydration and increasing the efficiency of oral rehydration solution, avoiding intravenous rehydration, avoiding hospitalization. And what is really important is that the potential benefits of using antiemetics should always be weighted against possible adverse effects. Always when we develop guidelines, there is always a whole discussion. What is the efficacy and what are the risk or adverse events? And one of the antiemetics which is to be considered, and which I have to say it's recommended, is ondansetron, and it's a selective 5-HT3 receptor antagonist which blocks serotonin at 2 levels, peripherally on vagal nerve terminals and centrally in the chemoreceptor trigger zone, so both peripherally and centrally. You probably are very well aware it's commonly used in pediatric oncology when you start chemotherapy, when you give administer chemotherapy. This is widely used to alleviate nausea and vomiting, and currently is gaining the role of referral antiemetic for acute gastroenteritis in many, many settings, more and more commonly. This is a systematic review which we published with my colleagues, systematic review and meta-analysis on ondansetron for vomiting in children with acute gastroenteritis. And our conclusion from this systematic review was that compared with placebo, ondansetron administration for vomiting in children with acute gastroenteritis can improve the efficacy of oral rehydration therapy. And let me show some of the results of this systematic review. So the first which I would like to show you, and this outcome that we looked at, was a cessation of vomiting after administration the first dose. So it was in the first hour. So if you can see there was ondansetron which was given orally and intravenously. We have 1, 2, 3, 4 trials, and we have more than 500 participants. And here you will, 4 trials, more 540 participants. And you can see you increase the chance of the cessation of vomiting. You increase it by 49%, with number needed to 4. So 4 children would need to be treated with a single dose on ondansetron in order to have this cessation of vomiting after administration of the first dose. So this is one of the important results. And we also look at the number of other outcomes, such as failure of oral rehydration therapy, more than 340 participants, and it was reduction in the failure of oral rehydration therapy by 50%. Hospitalization, you can see here, more than 600 participants, and it was reduction in the risk of hospitalization by 50%. We look at the intravenous rehydration. It was reduction in the risk of intravenous rehydration by 55%. And finally, return to visit to the emergency department, and there was no significant difference. So these were the main results from our study to support our conclusion that this is an effective management. Of course, this was published in 2016, so there are new studies. One of the new studies was published, is this one, which covers single bolus of intravenous ondansetron at a dose 0.2 milligram per kilogram, which was effective, but it was a small trial, and still important because here it was given intravenously. And there are two other studies, large trials, which are really important for our discussion because they show that the degree of dehydration matters. Stefan Friedman is the first author in both publications. The first one was published in Annals of Emergency Medicine, and it was oral ondansetron administration in non-dehydrating children in Pakistan. And there was no effect of, so if there was no dehydration, there was no effect. And the second study published in Pediatrics, here in the first one, it was more than 600 participants. In this study, it was in dehydrated children, and I will show you the results because they are important. Large trial, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial with more than 900 participants. And you can see oral ondansetron administration to dehydrated children. This is the line of no effect. And here you have the primary outcome, intravenous risk reduction in the risk of intravenous fluid administration, reduction in the vomits. For hospitalization, there was no significant difference. For presence of some dehydration within 72 hours, there was no difference. Diarrhea, reduced frequency of diarrhea. For other outcomes, there was no significant difference. So in summary, it shows that whether a child is dehydrated or not, based on those studies, that matters. So what this study adds, emergency department oral ondansetron administration to dehydrated children with gastroenteritis associated vomiting in Pakistan safely reduces intravenous rehydration fluid administration and vomiting, and it should be considered to promote oral rehydration therapy in this population. What else is new? And this is another study which was published in 2020, very recently, in the April issue, I think, of Pediatrics. And it was a pairwise, a network meta-analysis. They look at 24 randomized control trial with more than 3,400 participants. The search date was December 2018. Please remember it because those very new studies from 2019 were not included here. And they look at children with acute gastroenteritis, and the intervention, as you can see, there were various antiemetics. Metoclopramide, ondansetron, domperidone, dexamethasone, dimenhydrinate, and granisetron. So six different antiemetics compared with placebo or no intervention. And as so often, they look at the primary outcomes such as cessation of vomiting as hospitalization. This was pairwise and network meta-analysis. What is a pairwise and network meta-analysis? You probably are familiar, but in case you are not familiar, I will just very briefly explain to you. Pairwise, or the standard meta-analysis, allows you to compare one intervention with another, and then you summarize the results. So intervention A versus B, and you summarize. B versus C, and you summarize. So you only know this, what is the difference between those two. You will not know what is the difference between A and C. A network meta-analysis is a meta-analysis that is a technique to gather evidence from direct and indirect comparison. So you can also compare, for example, A versus C, A versus B, whatever. Even if it was not compared in the randomized control trial. So this is a difference between pairwise or standard meta-analysis and network meta-analysis. Again, allows you to gather evidence from direct and indirect comparisons. And also, very briefly, how to understand this network graph, a short explanation. So you will see these circles, a lot of them, and they represent the drug as a node in the network. You see all these lines, many lines, which represent direct comparison. So here it's a placebo and ondansetron, for example. And finally, you see that there is a different thickness of these lines, and it represents the number of RCTs included in the comparison. So the more thick it is, it shows that there are more studies. So this is just for the interpretation, and you can see there was a number of outcomes. That is a look at this network meta-analysis. I will not go with too many details. I will just show you the summary of results for all outcomes. And you can see that it's quite a busy table, and they look at benefit outcomes and at hard outcomes. And they found that with high certainty for cessation of vomiting, for hospitalization, for prevention and the need of intravenous rehydration, and ondansetron was categorized as the best intervention, always the best intervention. And here for vomiting number, may be better than placebo, and for revisit emergency department, may be again the best intervention. They also look at the harm outcomes, and ondansetron was considered similar to the placebo with high certainty for side effects, and as maybe similar to placebo with low certainty for causing diarrhea. So they look for benefits and for harms. And the overall conclusion drawn by the authors was that ondansetron is the only intervention that revealed an effect on the cessation of vomiting, on preventing hospitalization, in reducing the need for intravenous rehydration. And ondansetron was also considered a safe intervention. So an important network meta-analysis, recent data, which looked at ondansetron, but in the context of other antiemetics. So I showed you the evidence, and now the question is what the guidelines say. And again, I go to exactly the same guidelines, ESPGHAN, American guidelines, and universal by ESPGHAN. And you see that all of them are quite consistent. Yes, yes, yes. ESPGHAN says, may be considered, however, a clearance on safety in children is needed. American guidelines from Infectious Disease Society may be given in children above 4 years of age. This is the only society which makes such an age limit. I will come back to it. And universal ESPGHAN may be considered a warning label by both FDA, Food and Drug Administration, EMA, which is European Medical Agency, should be taken into account by healthcare professionals, and cost might be considered in many settings. So now you suddenly see this word safety or warning label. So let me very briefly to summarize what are the safety issues. It's in 2011 that the FDA issued a warning that ondansetron might induce fatal arrhythmias, leading to concerns about emergency department use. It was in adults, but this was an important warning. So what was next? Stephen Friedman, whom I already mentioned as the author of these two recent publications, in dehydrated and non-dehydrated population in Pakistan, but he's originally from Canada. And he performed a systematic review and post-marketing analysis. And there were no reports describing an arrhythmia associated with single oral ondansetron dose administration were identified. And the conclusion was that this study supports the safety of the clinical practice of administering a single oral ondansetron dose to low-risk patients without the need for screening evaluation. So in general, there is no screening evaluation. However, if you do have someone with cardiac disease, if well-known cardiac arrhythmia, that of course the screening, ECG, and probably electrolytes should be considered. So ondansetron, what would be overall recommendation based on the evidence which I showed you? Ondansetron administered either orally or intravenously, as it was given in the clinical trials, as a single dose, was effective in reducing vomiting and may avoid hospital admission. And ondansetron therapy may be considered for children who present to the emergency department with vomiting related to suspected acute gastroenteritis and who have mild to moderate dehydration or who have failed oral rehydration solution. Once again, I indicate this, I want to underline this, which is this recent study showing that the degree of dehydration matters. Practical issues on ondansetron. So in most of the studies which was used, it's 0.15 milligrams per kilogram as a single dose. And I summarized for you what are the data saying for intravenous administration and for oral administration. In many countries, it's used orally. I know that in some countries, it's not available orally, so then it's only intravenously. In our country, in Poland, we are using it orally. And here are the doses per kilogram, or they are weight-based oral dosing, so whatever is more convenient. But this is just to remember at least one value as a single dose. This comes from Canadian recommendation. I think that Canada was probably one of the first countries to start using ondansetron very commonly. Oral rehydration therapy should be initiated 15 minutes to 30 minutes after administration of oral ondansetron. So you wait for 15 to 30 minutes and you start oral rehydration therapy. And the use of a single dose of oral ondansetron is recommended as there are no benefits seen with multi-dose therapy. So this comes from Canadian Pediatric Society, and it's probably the only one which provided these practicalities of the administration. For other antiemetics, what the guidelines say, and you can see very consistent again, no. ESPGHAN is saying no evidence to support the use of other antiemetics. Infectious Disease Society from the United States, no. And universal recommendations from ESPGHAN, metoclopramide, although effective, has significant side effects and it's not recommended. And domperidone, it's not supported by randomized controlled trials, so very consistent. Well, so I did try to summarize you all what is known about acute gastroenteritis very briefly about some of the drugs, antiemetics, but you may say prevention is better than cure. And I really agree with that when it comes to diarrhea and vomiting. And before I finish, I just want to summarize and briefly comment on some of these preventive methods. Of course, safe drinking water, very important. Adequate sanitation and hygiene, hand washing with soap, and the introduction of the rotavirus vaccine in the national immunization program. And let me very briefly comment on two of these aspects. The first one is adequate sanitation and hygiene. I'm very much impressed with what Bill Gates is doing. I told you about this, that still there are 500,000 of children dying because of diarrhea, children below the 5 years of age. And I told you that it's a huge success because it used to be 4 to 5 million and now it's 500,000. But Bill Gates is saying it's much too much. And one of the reasons that children are dying and also adults are dying is no access to clean water, and the use, because our people are using water, rivers or whatever, and as a toilet, and then they are using drinking water from the same place. So there's really a need for high quality toilets, and he is very much involved in this waterless toilet project. He invested a lot of money, $200 million for the first time and then for the second time. And the advantage is that this kind of toilet requires no connection to drainage pipes on mainline sewers, so it's really waterless. And my understanding is that now in the testing phase, I know that, as far as I know, that he wants the price to be as reduced as possible. At the moment, it's quite expensive, but please remember that the cost of the computers many, many years ago were also quite high. And please, nowadays it's, well, relatively cheap, much cheaper than it used to be. And the second thing which I would like to comment is hand washing, and it's especially important during the COVID pandemic, that keeping hands clean is especially important to prevent the virus from spreading. So in a way, I started with this SARS-CoV-2 and COVID-19, and I'm almost finishing with COVID. Okay. I know that the audience is likely to remember only 3 things from each presentation or speech, so I will try now to summarize what I think is important, and I will go back to the question which I asked at the beginning. So my question first, the first question was, is acute gastroenteritis still a problem? And the answer is yes, acute gastroenteritis is still a cause of death, mainly in low and middle income countries, and a frequent cause of visit to the emergency department. And of course, this is more for high income countries. So yes, it is a problem. Second, is vomiting during acute gastroenteritis a problem? Yes, it is. And interrupting emesis will likely help with rehydration therapy. And my question number 3 was, at the beginning, antiemetic in children with acute gastroenteritis to use or not to use. And my answer is, based on the evidence that ondansetron administered either orally or intravenously as a single dose is effective in reducing vomiting and may help avoiding hospital admission. So these are my 3 take-home messages based on the evidence, but even if the best evidence-based guidelines are available, they do not automatically lead to improved health outcomes, as you know very well. And you can see that there are many barriers between evidence and clinical outcomes. And these barriers extend from awareness to adherence. And there's a lot to do for physicians and for patients. For physicians has to be aware of the evidence and aware of the guidelines. They have to accept the guidelines. The evidence, the guidelines should be applicable. Physicians should be able and act on the evidence. And there's also a role for patients. The patients have to agree with the evidence, with the guidelines, and last but not least, adhere to the guidelines. So really barriers extend from awareness to adherence. The fact that evidence is available, that it does not automatically lead to improved health outcomes. And let me finish with a final comment, and the final comment is, make sure you have finished speaking before your audience has finished listening. I did my best. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Hania, for this excellent scientific talk. As you see, we have 66 questions. Yes, we can go through. Yes, with me? You hear me well?
Yeah, I do hear you very well. So I will try now to look at the question. Okay.
Yes.
What about the percentage of children?
Yes, I will ask you, and then we can respond by answer. Yes. First question: lactose-free formula for diarrhea more than 14 days. For how long?
And that's a very good question, and not for the first time, which is being asked. It was not specified in our guidelines But I would say, first of all, if you use it for acute gastroenteritis, it's really just for a few days. But if you use it for chronic diarrhea, which means above 14 days, I think it very much depends on the cause, what is behind it. So if the question really relates to acute gastroenteritis in hospitalized children, I should say just for a few days. But I'm sure that the next speaker will talk a lot about lactose intolerance, and then he will answer the question more.
Okay. Another question: if it is breastfed, we can go to lactose-free formula or not, or continue breastfeeding?
Continue breastfeeding, as I showed in my, and it, of course, it contains lactose. It's one of the more arguments that there is no need to eliminate lactose. And in our previous guidelines in 2008, ESPGHAN guidelines, we did not recommend lactose-free formula for outpatients and for inpatients. Now it has changed. It has changed because of the Cochrane review, which was published in 2014, and it shows that in hospitalized children, which means in those which are more severe sick, because usually those children who are admitted to the hospital are more sick than those which are treated as outpatients. So those children will need probably for a few days lactose-free, or at least lactose reduced with a reduced content of lactose. I don't know which kind of formulas available in your country. In my country, there are both lactose reduced with reduced content and also lactose-free formulas.
Okay. By symptoms, how can we differentiate between functional FGID and organic one?
Then you go to another topic now. Now we will have another webinar. So perhaps this is a good occasion to invite people to join us for another webinar, which will be today. And then if I answer today, I will have nothing to say.
Yeah, this is a question from one of the pediatric figure in Egypt and Middle East here.
Okay.
Yes, okay. Another question. Can ondansetron be combined with antacid as H2 blocker in the same injection?
Well, I don't see any reason why.
First, I'd like to see that in Egypt, we have no oral ondansetron. We have only intravenous ondansetron in Egyptian market, yeah?
Well, so it's a difference, but I can tell you many years ago, or some years ago, we had the same situation. We had intravenous only, and now it has changed, and probably it will change in your country. So that's why, because you told me about that before the meeting, before this webinar, so that's why I put some attention that in studies, in this randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial, it was also, there were studies with oral ondansetron, but also with intravenous ondansetron.
Yeah.
So when we were doing our meta-analysis, we did want to do the subgroup analysis, like compare oral versus intravenous. But at that time, we did not have enough data. We are now working on the update, so perhaps we'll be able to say, but at the moment, both routes, which means oral and intravenous, can be used. And of course, if you have the oral preparation, you can use oral because it's very convenient. If you don't have it, there's nothing you can do. You want to use antiemetics, and this is the only one which is recommended, as I showed you in all the guidelines. And all the guidelines are very consistent. So you use as a single dose, which is really important.
Yes, okay. My question is, can ondansetron be combined with antacid at H2 receptor in the same injection?
I don't see any reason why it should be combined. We are talking about acute gastroenteritis. No reason to combine them, not at all.
Yes, okay. In acute gastroenteritis, what is the optimal dose for ondansetron and the optimal dose for treatment duration and the optimal treatment of duration?
It's a single dose for acute gastroenteritis, so it's very, very easy. And it's the same for oral and for intravenous. So there is no, and if you use repetitive doses, there is always a risk, especially with intravenous, of side effects. So I think we have to keep in mind that, first of all, also vomiting ceases with time. We know that vomiting lasts for, let's say, up to 12 hours or something like that. And then it goes away. Then diarrhea becomes more and more pronounced, but it's single dose and you don't have to repeat.
Yes. Okay. Another question: in acute gastroenteritis, some patients experience symptoms including fever and diarrhea only. Could ondansetron be used as a prophylactic treatment in such cases, and in which dose?
No, it should not be used prophylactically. So if there is no vomiting, there is no need to use ondansetron. And in clinical trials, it was used when the child was vomiting. It was usually one of the inclusion criteria.
Yes. Okay. Neonatal gastroenteritis, how to manage, and ondansetron is allowed to be used? There is also a question.
Yes, and then I already showed you, because if you look at the data and the age, you probably notice that there were differences when it comes to different society. For example, in the American guidelines, it was clearly stated in children above 4 years. The Canadians' recommendations by Friedman, he's saying in children above 8 kilograms. And intravenously, from one of the study, it was also used in children above 1 month of age. So you see some discrepancy between those children. So I would say probably in the neonatal period, we also do not see so much of acute gastroenteritis, unless it's, well, maybe it's different in your country. We usually see it in children 3 or 6 months of age, but usually not in the neonatal period. So I do not see any reason, definitely, for routine use of ondansetron.
Yes. Okay. Another
Rehydration this is what is really important.
Okay. Okay. In gastroenteritis, does the route of administration of antiemetic differs, and why?
Say again?
In gastroenteritis, does the route of administration of antiemetic differs, and why? Oral from intravenous.
I already mentioned that there is oral and intravenous, and the studies were
there is any significant difference here?
No, in the effect, as I already started to explain it, when we are doing our meta-analysis, we did try to see if there is a difference between those two drugs, but there were not enough studies to do the subgroup analysis. So I don't have at the moment any scientific rationale to say that one drug route is better than the other one. Of course, oral is always more convenient, that's for sure. So if you are, hopefully you will have the oral preparation, but until you have, and when you want to use it, then this is the only way you can use it in your country. But this will come.
Yes, okay. Another question: when you advise refeeding, and what food you prefer? I think after gastroenteritis, yeah.
Exactly the same as before. There is no need to change, to start any kind of special diet. When I was at the medical school, which was really long time ago, we were practicing that there was a low lactose, as a hydrolyzed formulas, etc. special diet. Nothing like that. Age-appropriate diet, exactly the same what children, infants were having before diarrhea episodes. You have, and no starvation. You do not stop them for more than 3, 4, maximum 6 hours. Rehydration and then refeeding.
Okay.
Very important,
yes.
especially in children with malnutrition, that you do not starve them. It's really important. I know that you do have the problem with malnutrition, because I talked to many of your colleagues when I was, even if I was not in Egypt. I'm complaining now. Now I cannot travel anywhere. Now I do regret it so much.
In Egypt, there is no malnourished baby in Egypt. Just I laugh, yeah. Just I laugh, yeah. It is a joke, yeah.
That you are taking very good care.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Another question: will the new fecal-oral route transmission of COVID-19 change the strategies of protection?
We don't know. We don't know.
We don't
and
know.
I don't know even if it's as infectious, you know, the stools, if it's as infectious as droplets with so we don't know. We are learning. You know, 6 months ago, 5 months ago, we didn't know about the virus. We didn't know about the disease. All of us are reading the literature. So I showed you recent data data. I showed you what it is, but we are all learning. But definitely it shows if there is in half of the cases you can identify the virus, you have to think about that this is one of the options. Whether or not something will change, you know, the WHO, CDC, Center for Disease Controls are always saying the data as of, let's say, 26th of April. And on the 27th, it might be something completely different. So we are learning, we are reading the literature.
To what extent racecadotril safe in children with impending dehydration? Racecadotril.
Yes, to what extent?
Yes, in children with impending dehydration. Racecadotril.
I don't think that I can hear. Racecadotril.
Yeah, racecadotril safe in children with impending dehydration. To what extent? The safe. To what extent safety in children with impending dehydration of racecadotril?
I don't understand the question. I'm sorry.
To what extent racecadotril safe children with impending dehydration? Safety.
What is the safety?
Yes, what is the safety with impending dehydration?
Okay, so if it comes to the safety of racecadotril, it's generally considered as a safe drug because otherwise it would not be recommended by the ESPGHAN, even if there were some discussion that but generally it's now considered that it can be used. So there are no major safety concerns.
Yes, another question, rule of domperidone in gastroenteritis as antiemetic.
Not recommended. Not metoclopramide, they are not recommended either because there are no studies. None of them. I showed you 6 or 7 with this network meta-analysis published in Pediatrics. So they compared various interventions, and the only one, and the reason for not recommended is usually because risk of side effects is higher, outweighs any potential benefits.
Yes, okay. I think ondansetron is the only used in literature, yeah? No?
Ondansetron is the only one which is recommended, and there is consistency among recommendations, among the guidelines. All of them recommend ondansetron.
And there is no contraindication for its use? No.
Yes, of course. And I already mentioned some safety issues, and these are with cardiac arrhythmias. So if you want to use it in a child who has some problems like heart disease or some electrolyte disturbances, let's say some renal disease or something like that, then you probably should, first of all, consider whether to use it or not. And if you think you want to use it, then you have to consider ECG and electrolyte levels, because it has a problem.
More than one dose, yeah? More than one dose.
And if you use it more than once, definitely.
Right. Efficacy of intramuscular administration of ondansetron.
I know that there were some studies, but usually, I cannot compare because there are not enough data, different routes. Usually it was intravenously or orally. But not enough evidence to say which route is the best one. Definitely most convenient for children is oral, that's for sure. So you need to have it in your country.
Yes, there is another question. There is some pediatrician use the ondansetron ampoule orally. What do you think about this?
No.
There is any explanation for this?
No, it's not we don't do it.
We don't it. Yes. Okay. There is we have a study from India shows that there is a question from one of a big figure in Egypt and the Middle East, Professor Adel Riyad. He asked about a study from India showed that you can.
This is a small. I showed you this study. It's a small, relatively small study. study, the importance for you is that it's about 60 children, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
Randomized double-blind placebo-controlled trial carried out in Vietnam, and the importance for you, for your country, is that it was a study with single intravenous administration of ondansetron at the dose 0.2 milligrams per kilogram. And there was some effect on the cessation of vomiting, so like in other studies. But of course, this is a small trial. So I think it should be always considered in the context of other data, not as a single trial.
Yes.
So it will be included in our updated meta-analysis. We are working on it.
Sorry, he asked about, there is a study from India shows that you can use the intravenous ampoule orally. What do you think?
Okay, that you can, I am not aware of it. So perhaps I should read, I misunderstood your question, I apologize. I'm not aware of it, that you can use it, and I have not seen it in the literature, so I have to check it.
Yes, took it.
Okay, thank you.
Another question from one of big Professor Hamid Al-Khayyat. What about persistent vomiting? How frequent to give ondansetron and the maximum dosing for persistent vomiting? One dose only for persistent?
We are only discussing acute gastroenteritis.
Yes.
Single dose.
Yes. He speaks about persistent vomiting. What can we do if we can use ondansetron more than one time?
No, it's not recommended, because if you want to use it more often, and then you increase the risk for side effects. So we are speaking about acute gastroenteritis, and usually all recommendations are saying single dose. Canadian recommendation are saying it's more safe compared to, they also recommend, as you know, oral ondansetron. And they do not recommend multi-dose.
Yes, okay. We have, as you see, 125 questions. Yes, you see? You see, 125 questions. We can postpone the question after Professor Mostafa Elhodhod will start. Please stay with us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I can see even some nice messages to me.
Yes, you have managed, and more than 128. Please stay with us, Professor, yeah?
Okay, I will.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
And now,
thank you very much, all of you. Thanks a lot. I really appreciate very much all your questions. And I'm really impressed, 583 participants, 85.
No. Yes, it is still with now. There is more than 1,000 with us.
Excellent.
This is a unique viewer. Yes?
Excellent.
Unique viewer. Yes?
Thanks a lot. Thank you very much.
We are live on the social media, on Facebook, social media. We are live also with Zoom. Yeah? Yes.
Excellent.
Yes. Please stay with us. We will return to you after Professor Mostafa Elhodhod finish his lecture. Yeah?
Okay.
Thank you very much. And now we will proceed to Dr. Abram Wagi, is marketing director of EVA Pharma. He will say welcome to all of others. Dr. Abram.
Hello, good evening all. Very happy to have you all in our webinar today. Thank you, Professor Bahbah, for this excellent organization. Also deliver my greetings and my thanks to Professor Hania for the interesting speech and many questions she answered today. Also, we are approaching and we are expecting a very good talk from Professor Elhodhod, for sure, as used to be done by his cancer. Now I will go with you through only 5 to 10 minutes maximum through EVA Pharma corporate presentation. What's the updates of EVA Pharma role in the society, and what's new to be shared with you. Now I'm sharing my screen. Before proceeding in the speech, I wish you all a happy Ramadan for you and your esteemed families. May God bring Ramadan with all blessings to be safe and in healthy situation with your families during the COVID-19 outbreak. Actually, it's hard time for all Egyptians and the whole world. So I wish all the best for the world and the economy and everything. Starting my presentation now with EVA Pharma purpose. What I should highlight here is that we have a very renowned purpose that focus on the local patient needs. As you see, we are highlighting here the keywords in each slide. What we stress on here is the local patient needs. Why we say local? This is because we are present now in 42 countries all over the world. And as you all know, each country has its own and its specific needs. So EVA Pharma purpose, I will read it for you, and you can read it from the screen. We are having a diverse top team that strives to save and improve millions of lives. We are very keen to have the top team, really, and offering sustainable medications, high-value medicine that address local patient needs, as I illustrate. For sure, I should speak about COVID-19 for a few seconds. For sure, with this cloud of professors, we are now approaching around 580 doctors. For sure, you all know that the COVID-19 outbreak is hitting every country, and the good news is that 85% of patients are developing either no symptoms, ranging to severe symptoms, but only 15% is in need for critical care. The good news here is that there are many products under trials and many molecules. What I can say here is that if you look on this slide, you will find Gilead. Gilead is the partner of a choice for EVA Pharma in the MENA region and all Africa, as you all know. We worked with them hand in hand with the MOH and the President Act of Social Welfare and Hepatitis C. And now they are improving their trials numbers and working very aggressively on developing remdesivir, which is antiviral, as you see. And the enrollment now done for 1,000 patients in phase 3 clinical trials. What EVA can support here is once a drug is approved by the FDA, being the local agent for Gilead all over Africa, we can provide it for Egyptians for sure as a top priority and the whole region. And those are the molecules under trials as shared in my last slide. We'll share with you now EVA Pharma actions and activities to support the society during the COVID-19 outbreak. EVA Pharma launched a big project to support what is called the Egyptian White Army. The good news is some professors here hearing us supported us a lot for sending their support and wishes for the Egyptian White Army. Also, we work hand in hand with some institutes of mental health to support the mood and the psychological state of the country and doctors for sure as a top priority, as you see in the pictures. Also, EVA Pharma went into a big consortium, international one, with Egyptian stamp in collaboration with Illinois American University. Illinois is a big university in America, in US, and with a big scientist, Egyptian scientist from Egypt, Dr. Sameh Hani Tawfiq, to provide the first Egyptian ventilator to support on ground the COVID-19 patients. Back to EVA Pharma corporate presentation. Actually, EVA Pharma, whom you all know, started 1997, but it has a long heritage and development, which is over 100 years now. EVA Pharma started in 1917 with Droguerie Riyad Armanios, which is the first Egyptian pharmaceutical company which was interested in importation and distribution. Actually, during this time, there were no Egyptian manufacturing of pharmaceutical medication. Then the heritage continued to have the first pharmacy in the downtown area, which is known for you all, Ataba, pharmacy La Santé, صيدلية الصحة بالعتبة. For sure, this was a big investment. As you know, during the 19th, early 19th, pharmacies were not enough. It was a landmark for the area. You can say the pharmacy of this territory or this one. So it was a big investment that is continued to build the first pharmaceutical industry in Egypt, which is Laboratoire Delta أو معامل الدلتا للصناعة الدوائية, which was concerned about mixing and providing medication inside the laboratories, which we call the emerging distribution business. This emerging distribution business is now having a dream to be one of the top 20 companies all over the world, but we are proud to be headquartered in Egypt. As you see in this picture, Eva Pharma is present in 42 countries all over the world, with main focus on Africa, Black Africa, and GCC, and East Europe and Canada. You can see the Canadian flag on the far west area. We are very proud that we are the only Egyptian company that have registered products in Canada called Cytosine or Diabasic. If you are all familiar with Cytosine in Egypt, it's for diabetic neuropathy, but in Canada, it's registered under the name of Diabasic. As you see the license, for sure the handwriting here and the typing is very small, but this is the license from Canada. We are very proud to extend our geographical expansion to have the first German company in our group, which is Elbe Life Science, headquartered in Hamburg. And this is a big arm for Eva Pharma to be having an European edge. The edge here is that this company is dedicated, as you see, in bringing non-European health products to be distributed and manufactured in Europe with high-quality medications for licensing, co-development, and direct marketing. Also, we have 3 products now registered in Germany. First one is here in Egypt called Prostanorm. In Germany, it's Sobhalmeto. Genofil for osteoarthritis in Egypt is called Genic Vital. And Carnivita Forte in Egypt is called L-carnitine. So we have now 3 products in Germany. This is a picture of our facility in Haram, our first factory. We have 3. This is the first one. And you have biggest one in the MENA region and Middle East in 6th of October called Horus, and third one in 10th of Ramadan city. And this is our accreditation worldwide. This is the EU, GMB, UDRA, which is Europe Drug Regulatory Authorities. This is a stamp that Eva Pharma quality is same like European ones, which has many benefits to secure that your products which you prescribe in Egypt here is having the same quality as Europe, exactly the same. Also bringing us the benefits that any European country want to produce. This company can use Eva Pharma as a hub for producing and manufacturing, then to redistribute this all over the world. And this is our accreditation worldwide, as you see, Health Canada, EMA, European Medicine Agency, and all the accreditation of ISO and GCC and Saudi FDA. And this is the CABA accreditation. This is our vial and ampoule line, which are proud that we produce the Fatron using it. This is our capabilities in Haram facilities, which I showed you a picture. I showed you the picture earlier, with a capacity approaching 2 million bottles per month. Very huge manufacturing capabilities. And this is the capsule filling machine. This is a landscape picture for our site, a big site in 6th of October industrial zone. The first, this Horus site in the zone of 6th of October is the biggest one in the MENA region and providing high-tech manufacturing capabilities and very massive production scale, state-of-art manufacturing capabilities. Now we are sharing with you a good news that we are in process to get the FDA approval for our sites. We are currently in stage 3, as you see. This is long process, which we succeeded in stage 1 and 2, and proceeding in stage 3, moving on to stage 5. And the other good news I want to share that we are now getting the approvals of licensing of a cephalosporin production line with microdosing. Back to EVA Pharma performance in Egypt, which is the main concern of you for sure. EVA Pharma is now ranked number 2 as a manufacturer and number 5 as a corporation, with previous period growth, which is the growth over the same period last year, around 22%, which is the biggest one all over the top 5 to 6 companies. We have a dream to be number 1 soon. This is a picture of our research center, Munir Armanios Research Center, what is called MARC. This is the first and the biggest R&D center all over Egypt and the Middle East. This is 6-floor building, as you see, around many scientists, around 90 scientists experienced in research and development to get for you all EVA Pharma medication with the best quality you wish for your patient. To see that our ondansetron is better than others and everything to be meeting your expectations. This is the MARC Center opening ceremony with Dr. Riyad, the CEO, and Professor Magdi Yaoub, as you see in the opening. And this is also a big protocol for cooperation with the big scientist of Egypt, Dr. Mostafa Said, in cancer treatments and providing our facilities to support his researches and the clinical trials. This is pictures from our R&D center with all high-tech machines. Finally, I would like to close with a big advanced pharmaceutical act from EVA Pharma, that now we have all our products serialized. If you see the mouse cursor, it's showing that on all products packs, you will find a serial number here of 14 letters and numbers. This is something unique. For each pack, it has a special number. Why we do so? To avoid any problems in counterfeit, any adulteration in pharmaceutical products in Egypt. Now, you just scan the QR code here, and this tell you, is this authentic product from EVA Pharma or no? If it is authentic, it will show you it's okay. If not, you can easily call EVA Pharma and we spot this and make a case. I hope I wasn't silly guest. Thank you for the day. I am very happy to have this eminent crowd of professors, and thank you again for Professor Hania, Professor Bahbah for the moderation, and expecting a very good talk from Professor Elhodhod. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim, for this illustrative for this illustrative talk about EVA Pharma, and thank you to all team of EVA Pharma. And now it is the time for our big figure, our teacher to all. It is my honor to represent Professor Mostafa Elhodhod, Professor of Pediatric Gastroenterology and the head of Pediatric Department Ain Shams University. Mostafa معايا؟
أيوة Wael.
Professor Elhodhod.
Yes.
Yes, we have a pleasure to be with us. Thank you very much. Thank you. Your floor.
Thank you, Dr. Wael and your team. And thank you, Hania, for your kind presentation. And thanks for EVA for sponsoring this activity. And actually, this talk is sponsored with EVA Pharma without any interference with its scientific contents. So, بمناسبة إن إحنا كلنا في معركة مع الكوفيد 19، خلينا أفكركم بكلام أحمد فؤاد نجم الفاجومي لما قال: الاسم مصري والسن أصغر أهل عصري، رغم انسدال الشيب ضفاير من شوشتي لما لتحت خصري وعجبي. الصورة دي صورة جميلة جدا. In this picture, the cow doctor is treating a cow patient, and he's using the neuro-linguistic programming, and he's afraid to tell him that he is lactose intolerant. So he said to him first, the good news is that you don't have mad cow's disease, but the bad news that you are cow lactose intolerance. And you know, if this baby cow is lactose intolerant, how can he feed? So let us start with the background with this lactose, which is a disaccharide produced in the milk of mammalians and hydrolyzed into its two products, glucose and galactose, at the tip of the villus of the enterocyte by an enzyme called lactase, or you can call it beta-D galactosidase, or more scientifically, it's called lactose fluorescein hydrolase. And this is a picture of the combination between glucose and the galactose to form lactose. By the way, if you have two molecules of lactose linked together, this is lactulose, which is a laxative. Lactose has two isomers, and this may answer the question, what about the feeding, breastfeeding in lactose intolerant persons? We have alpha lactose and beta lactose, and the differences actually are in the solubility and the melting degree and its isomerization appearance. And actually, beta isomer can be dissolved more in water, so 500 grams can be dissolved in a liter compared to 70 grams only in case of alpha lactose. By the way, breast milk has beta lactose and cow's milk are alpha lactose. Lactase enzyme has two sites, one to hydrolyze lactose and the second is to hydrolyze fluorescein or some other glycolipids as well, to separate galactose from the glycolipids as well. And if you notice this, you can see that this lactase enzyme can have different functions and actions. And you can see that some of the persons are having some digestive processes else than lactose alone. Actually, it grows inside the fetus and it increases by time so that it reaches its maximum at birth, and it begins to decrease just a few months after delivery. Particularly between the age of 3 and 5 years of age, it reaches 10% of its activity, and then it remains for the rest of lives. So this is due to decreased synthesis by an abnormal gene expression rather than decreasing intake of milk as it was thought before. يعني باختصار مش عشان بطلنا نشرب لبن ينزل اللاكتيز enzyme. لا الكلام ده ما بقاش مظبوط, because lactase enzyme is a non-inducible enzyme. It does not increase with lactose and it doesn't decrease with decreasing lactose. Ahmed, a breastfed 3-month-old boy, used to have watery motions of 10 times per day. The doctor tried many anti-diarrhea remedies, but in vain. Another doctor told the mother, this is a gastrocolic reflex, provided his weight is okay. But because of severe napkin dermatitis, she visited another doctor who prescribed a soya milk with a breastfeeding. And the problem persisted in spite of this. What went wrong and what was missing here? Let us go through this presentation and see what we are going to know. So lactose malabsorption is defective absorption of lactose, and lactose intolerance is a lactose malabsorption with clinical manifestations. And you can see here a very wide circle of lactose malabsorption with a smaller amount of lactose intolerance. And actually, there is something called colonic salvage. And by colonic salvage, we mean when this lactose escapes the absorption in the small intestine and reaches the colon, it made the bacteria inside, and these bacteria will ferment this lactose and they produce short-chain fatty acids with some other molecules. And these short-chain fatty acids are absorbed again with energy to the enterocytes, energy to the bacteria, and energy to the child himself. And we have abnormalities of lactase enzyme of 4 types. The first type is developmental lactase deficiency, which means you are preterm and you have this decrease, and it's expected that this will increase, and it takes about few weeks to few months to reach its full capacity after birth. The second type, which is a very rare, in my life I have seen only 4 cases of this congenital lactase deficiency, which is irreversible, genetically determined, and it was fatal before the era of manipulation of lactose in the formulae. Secondary type, it's acquired due to inflammation of the gut and damage of the villi, and this is reversible. It is the most common type of lactase enzyme deficiency. What about the primary adult transient hypolactasia? This is acquired. It didn't start from birth. It's partially reversible and very common in adult population. And actually, the improvement in this condition is not due to synthesis of new lactase, but actually it's due to the bacteria acting in the colonic flora. So among 7 pillions, we expect to have 4 pillions having lactose malabsorption, but actually lactose intolerance can represent a small amount, may reach half billion. If you can look at this diagram with the small intestine, and this is the villus, and we take one cell, and this is the cell, and this is the microvilli, and at the tip of this microvillus, lactase is present, so that we expect that any damage, any injury at this site can lead to deficiency of lactase. And if lactase is deficient, lactose will not be absorbed. It will reach to the bacteria, and lactose will be fermented, leading to water, lactic acid, short-chain fatty acids. So this acid and water will come as diarrhea, that is acidic stool, and this acidic stool will lead to many things, with burn of the perianal area and napkin dermatitis, as well as the losses of this water, as well as the short-chain fatty acids and some other volatile gases like methane and carbon dioxide and hydrogen will be produced. Some of them will come in the stool as well, leading to the foamy nature of the stool and the explosive nature of some other motions. But some of this will be reabsorbed to the circulation and come in the exhaled breathing, and you can take this expiratory air and examine it for carbon dioxide, for methane, or for hydrogen. One of the advantages of lactose is not only giving glucose, is not only giving lactose that is essential for myelin sheath formation and the neurologic maturation, but it also enhances absorption of calcium phosphate, magnesium, and zinc. It also acts as a fuel for the bifidobacterium, and actually this bacteria will improve the outcome of digestion, immunity, and many other things of the probiotics. Genetics of lactase. Lactase gene is present on chromosome 21 on the long arm, band 21, which includes 17 exons. And we have in Europe and other countries 2 famous polymorphisms. One of them is working through a different mutation, that is C and T, and the other is working through a mutation between G and A. And if you have this abnormal genotype of C and C, you are going to be diseased. And if you are having C and T or T and T, you are going to have persistence of lactase activity. Similarly, the same is seen with the GA polymorphism. In which if you have GG, you are going to have a disease of lactose malabsorption. However, GA and AA will be normal with persistent lactase in adults. Actually, this is the flow of the maturation of the enzyme. And this is the adult hypolactasia. And as we said before, it varies from country to country. You can see in some European countries that the problem is not a great issue. It's not a great deal, 1% in Sweden, for example. However, in Far East, it may reach 100%. So that what is the explanation? The most accepted is the geographic predilection of nutrition. So in countries in which dairy products were essential in this environment, persons will be having persistence of lactase. We don't know. Is this an advantage so that those who are having the persistence gene pattern will persistent live, and those who are not will leave the place or they are going to die? We are not sure what have happened, but this map will show the distribution of the cows raising and use of dairy products, and this is the prevalence of cows lactose intolerance as well. You can see it. This is the gene study, and this is the same as we have seen. And in some persons having T and T, you can see that the lactase activity is high. If it is C and T, lactase is average, and anything above 50% is helpful. And if it is C and C, you can see a very low lactase activity, and this mutation is associated with lactose malabsorption. Take care. Thyroxine promotes the decline of lactase enzyme. Hydrocortisone can increase the lactase levels. Premature can persist to have overexpression after birth for a few weeks. Improvement of lactase and the lactose digestion in adults and the children may be due to the development of bacteria rather than increasing the lactase enzyme itself, or maybe an expression of improving a secondary cause and return to normal villus pattern. Acquired lactase deficiency may follow gastrointestinal infections, GI allergy, inflammatory processes, but keep an eye on the possibility that lactase is predominant in jejunum, not in the ileum. It decreases when we go distally, so that diseases which affect the terminal ileum are not usually associated with lactose malabsorption, like in Crohn's disease, and diseases that affect the jejunum and the duodenum, like in case of celiac disease, may be associated with lactose intolerance secondary till the improvement and regeneration of the villi happens again. And you can imagine the situation when you look at this scanning electron microscopy of a normal villi, and this with reduced villus length and dimensions, so that the surface area will be decreased, and in addition, the lactase will be deficient. So age, we expect it to be a disease of infection because of the secondary affection. It may be present in adults in a percentage different according to the ethnic groups, and in our community, because gastroenteritis is the most common insult to the GIT, and it occurs of below 5, we expect it to be because of secondary lactose malabsorption. The clinical presentation may change from a trivial presentation of just some colics to severe presentation mimicking surgical conditions. And in my practice, actually, I meet at least monthly 3 to 5 cases presenting after appendectomy who were actually a case of severe form of lactose malabsorption and lactose intolerance, and symptoms persist. And when we talk the milk off, everything improves and everything is okay. And GI symptoms may include bloating, abdominal discomfort, gaseous distension, flatulence from 1 hour to few hours after ingestion of milk. Take care. When you take fat, gastric emptying is decreased, and this will ameliorate the symptoms. وهنا هتلاقوا بعض الأمهات تقول لما بديله لبن كامل الدسم بيبقى أحسن ما اديله لبن خالي الدسم, which is an excellent observation by mothers. However, when you add carbohydrates, this will increase the gastric emptying, and a lot of lactose will reach the small intestine and it will escape the digestion. The surface area is not sufficient to digest this amount and symptoms will appear. And this is observed by the Egyptian mothers as well. الأم تقول لك لما بحليه له بسكر بيحصل له إسهال, تروح أنت مفكر في multiple carbohydrate or sugar malabsorption disorder, وهو في الحقيقة يا دوبك هو lactose intolerance alone. Sometimes allergies may mimic the clinical manifestation of lactose intolerance, but inflammatory signs are present in cases with allergy, but not present in cases with lactose intolerances. Stool is usually loose, watery, acidic, sometimes foamy, or explosive by the mixture of gas and water. Abdominal pain, it's usually non-specific, non-focal abdominal pain, crampy sometimes, but may be severe. Focal abdominal pain significantly worsened by palpation. After you palpate the abdomen, the pain will increase and may induce a rebound tenderness and make it very difficult to differentiate from a surgical condition. Purpurigmai, and you have to differentiate from all causes of diarrhea, whether acute diarrhea or chronic diarrhea, all causes of malabsorption syndromes, all causes of protein intolerance. How to test and reach your diagnosis? Blood testing, actually we don't need this in most of the cases, and gene study showing the CC or GG type may delineate those who are genetically predisposed for lactose intolerance. Measuring the reducing substances in the stool, and if it's not quantitative, it's usually of not great deal. وبالتالي كتير قوي من التحاليل اللي عمالة تطلع positive reducing sugars, positive reducing substances, this is usually rubbish and usually makes you thinking wrongly. Acidic stool, and it should be quantitatively below 5.5 is essential to define this is acidic stool of malabsorption. Keep in mind that normally stool is acidic in most of the infants, and if it's not given the value of the pH, you are catching the air. Dietary elimination test, in which you are going to take the milk off, then you give the milk again, and taking the milk off will improve and ameliorate the symptoms, and this will appear within days, and giving the milk again will lead to a reappearance of symptoms. Take care. You can take the milk with improvement, take it off with improvement, and giving it again with deterioration, and this may be the allergy and not the lactose intolerance. So it needs a meticulous, this elimination challenge needs a very meticulous approach. Hydrogen breath test. You remember in the diagram in which we have demonstrated production of hydrogen in the fermentation process, actually there is no mechanism in the body that liberates hydrogen in a normal way in our physiology. So if we measure the air or inspired air hydrogen, and then remeasure the expiratory hydrogen after a loading dose of lactose, we can find marked elevation of hydrogen, and this will be the hydrogen breath test. And if it is more than 20 parts per millions increasing in the air, this denotes a lactose malabsorption. Actually, this test can be used for glucose malabsorption, for galactose, for fructose, any test. You can give the loading dose of the sugar and the measure before and after, and thinking what is the cause of this elevation. It is fermentation, which means this sugar escaped absorption. Take care. Antibiotic administration may give false results of this test. Lac test, which is a 4-galactosyl xylose which is administered orally, and the amount of diallose is measured in a 24-hour urinary sample, is getting a very high specificity and the sensitivity reaching 100, and actually it is an easy test. Do biopsy, do not do biopsy. In fact, in the primary form, we don't need to do this because eliminatory challenge is sufficient. However, if you are in doubt, you can do a biopsy, and this biopsy will be tested for biologic activity by a rapid duodenal biopsy test, which is a lactose intolerant quick test, in which we put a calorimetric reagent with the tissue biopsy in from the duodenum, incubated with lactose for 20 minutes, and a change of color will denote is there lactase or not. And this is very simple test, but invasive one. Coming to the treatment. In developmental lactase deficiency happening in a preterm, do not be afraid. And giving some lactose may help to stimulate more lactase. Lactose intolerance can be improved by dietary manipulation. If quantity of lactose is increased slowly over time, lactobacilli are going to grow in the colon, and many persons of this category can improve. You can use lactase from yeasts, and it's available in a medicinal form. So you have drops, you have tablets, you can use it in addition to the milk, and it can change lactose into glucose and galactose. Actually, it helps in children and adults, but usually it's not a good remedy in infant feeding, because if you put these lactase drops, you cannot judge the exact time because it needs time to ferment. And if you left it more and more, soury feeling will be there, and taste of soury will be there, and maybe not tolerated. Yogurt with live cultures may be helpful. Dairy products with reduced lactose are available. And many foods will contain lactose. Get sure of the labeling. And from this place, I request all manufacturers to put their labels, and this is very important. وضع العلامة في مصر يحتاج تقنين وقانون. اوعى تقول ما أنا هو دايب في المية بتاعت الشرش بتاعت اللبن، وبالتالي الجبنة والزبادي ما فيهمش. لا، لو الزبادي اللي انت عملته ده هو full yogurt, so that all lactose was changed into lactic acid, lactose is almost zero, almost. But if you are using partially formed yogurt, it will contain some lactose. For example, mozzarella has got 1 gram lactose per 1 ounce of mozzarella, which is a large amount of Swiss cheese have a little of it. But cottage cheese, الجبنة القريش فيها يا جماعة 3 جرام لكل نص كوباية من الجبنة القريش. دي أكلات فيها كالسيوم because we need calcium in these persons بتساعدنا. طيب الكلام ده لو كان حد كبير children or adults. What about the milk dependent infants؟ مشكلة كبيرة، طفل بيرضع هنعمل فيه إيه؟ We should use lactose modified formula. الحقيقة مع السيمتوماتولوجي الشديد هنستخدم اللاكتوز فري فورمولا، وإحنا دايما مدة الاستخدام بتاعتنا according to the disease. If it is gastroenteritis, it should be the severe form of gastroenteritis, usually necessitating intravenous fluid administration and hospitalization to get sure that this person is in need of to take off lactose. And you are going to use it for the duration of the diarrhea itself, which is few days, 3 to 5 days or 8 days maximally. Then you are going to introduce a lactose formula again. Sometimes you need to introduce it gradually over a few days again. Sometimes this lactose-free formula may be needed for a longer duration. For example, in chronic and persistent diarrhea, you may need it for. When you have this lactose-free formula, you should get sure of many things. First, it should be lactose-free. Keep an eye. Any milk-based formula, when it is called lactose-free, it contains the traces of lactose. So it's very helpful in lactose intolerance, even of the severest forms. But in a disease like lactosemia, it should never be used because these traces are not accepted level. So this may be the only indication for soya milk because sure, it is zero lactose. Carbohydrate should be in the maltodextrin form because they are easily digested, slow release of glucose, so they are not highly osmotic substances and will not increase the diarrhea. And you should supplement with calcium as well. To improve the regenerative capacity of the villi, especially in the second form of lactose intolerance, zinc is recommended here. And zinc may help the regenerative capacity, may help the maturation from crypt cells to vellus cells. As well, you know that lactose is important for zinc absorption. And when you are lacking this lactose absorption because of the lactose intolerance and lactase deficiency, your zinc level is actually maybe low. So it's not only sufficient to remove lactose from milk, but also it is ideal to plan for the ideal formula. Look at its calcium content and look at its zinc content. This is very important. So we can see here that the doctor did not notice that the mother is still breastfeeding, and usually there is no recommendation about breastfeeding and lactose intolerance. It's only in the genetic type, congenital type, that breastfeeding itself cannot be used because of the severe condition, but in other forms breastfeeding can continue. He used soya milk as well, and as we said, soya milk is zero lactose, but the problem persisted. This is not a primary case of lactose intolerance because the pathology persisted in spite of all of this. We think that there is an underlying condition like allergy or infection. We near to the end. Lactose malabsorption is almost universal. تلتين العالم عنده lactose malabsorption. Lactose intolerance is a smaller sector of this great sector. Lactose intolerance may be developmental, congenital, secondary, or transient adult type. Other factors should be guaranteed in this formula, not only to take lactose off, but to get sure that calcium is above the indicated level of a normal formula. And in addition, zinc should be supplemented inside this formula. And now we are ready for your questions.
Yes. Yeah, thank you, Professor Mostafa, for this excellent. Yes. You hear
Yes,
me, Dr. Mostafa?
Yes, with you, Dr. Wael.
Yes, شكرا جدا 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 على المحاضرة الرائعة دي يا دكتور مصطفى.
Thank you.
طبعا أول سؤال طبعا لازم أن يكون من الحبايب زي ما بيقولوا.
أيوة طبعا
معايا
حبايبي.
حضرتك. طبعا أول سؤال من بروفيسور إيهاب خيري.
حبيبي
طبعا بروفيسور إيهاب خيري one of the famous and the big figure in pediatric clinical nutrition and the head of pediatric clinical nutrition at Shams University.
Yes.
بيقول لحضرتك thank you for our great Professor Mostafa Elhodhod, excellent as usual. What do you prefer in gastroenteritis, low lactose or free lactose formula?
Actually, in gastroenteritis, if it is severe form, this is the only way to manipulate the lactose. And in this severe form, usually we need to have no lactose, lactose-free formula. Usually the place for reduced lactose is in conditions that are not very acute. For example, those with some colics, those with some distension, flatulence, the other manifestations of lactose malabsorption or intolerance, but in gastroenteritis severe form with damage of the villi that may reach just 1/10 of the surface area of the gut, we cannot use a reduced one. We usually resort for a few days of lactose-free formula.
برضو متحيز للدكتور إيهاب خيري. Do you recommend the use of soya milk in the first 6 months of life in infant with lactose intolerance?
Actually, soya milk is not recommended or should be avoided in the first 6 months of life. And there are many explanations of this. And in my opinion, the only indication of below 6 month use is galactosemia.
Yes, we have 156 question, Dr. Mustafa.
Okay, no
كتير.
problem.
حضرتك شايف؟ our dear professor حامد الخياط
Yes.
يسأل حضرتك, do you think that there is a place for lactase replacement therapy?
Yes. Thank you, Professor حامد. أولا أنا آسف إن أنا مسهرك لحد الوقت ده. أنا عارف البيبي يحب ينام شوية، لكن يعني متشكر إن أنت لسه معايا. أنا بس حابب أقول إنه الchildren and adults ما بنستخدمش فيهم قوي لاكتوز فري. إحنا بنحب نستخدم addition of two things. يا إما اللاكتيز انزيم نفسه بريبيرد، يا إما لاكتيز producing فلورا أو بكتيريا، ودي موجودة في منها drops وفي منها tablets can be taken before or with or just after the milk food or milk intake, and it's very helpful in children and adults. And I know many adults who are maintained on lactase remedies, whether it is lactase itself or it's available. It's available in Gulf area and it's imported to Egypt. It's not present in Egypt actually. Here, can you use the dead bacteria that is available in Egypt as probiotics? Actually, it cannot produce lactase because it is already dead. It's postbiotic rather than probiotic. So usually we import from Gulf area other probiotics that can produce lactase.
Yes. Another question. Some physicians diagnose lactose intolerance from stool pH only.
Yes.
False.
Actually, lactose in low pH of the stool means that there is fermentation of a carbohydrate. And this carbohydrate may be any type of sugar can be fermented. And this type of acidic stool does not mean alone that this is lactose intolerance. The most important when you find this very low pH of the stool that is below 5.5, you are going to take the lactose off. And if the case improved, then you can return to lactose again. And if the symptoms appear, this means that we are speaking about a case of lactose intolerance.
Yes. For how?
I mean, some children with irritable bowel syndrome may show manifestations of sugar malabsorption as well in addition. And actually myself, I'm not sure whether this is a case of irritable bowel syndrome or it is a case of sugar malabsorption coming like an irritable bowel syndrome. But the presence of a family history very suggestive of irritable bowel syndrome will suggest this. Sometimes they get help from taking some sugars, decreasing sugars in their food.
Yes.
Yeah.
Use of for how long use of lactose-free formula in a child with lactose intolerance?
If this is lactose intolerance due to acute gastroenteritis, it's few days. Then we are going to resume the full lactose formula again, gradually actually. And if it is due to a celiac disease, for example, it may need a few weeks till the elimination of gluten will help the gut villi, intestinal villi to regenerate and revive. And then we are going to resume the lactose after that. So actually, the only condition in which lactose-free formula is used for life is genetic type of congenital lactase deficiency or absence.
Yes, a famous question. What's the difference between cow milk allergy and lactose intolerance clinically? And by investigation, you need an approach.
Actually, it is a very tricky question.
Yes,
because,
okay.
Even with all your data, you can reach a point of equipoise in which you cannot be sure whether this is a cow milk protein allergy alone or cow's milk protein allergy with secondary lactose intolerance as well. However, in most of the cases of lactose, in cases with lactose intolerance, pH of the stool is very acidic. Actually, in cow's milk allergy, on top of inflammatory process, we expect normal pH or slightly alkaline pH of the stool. Presence of signs of inflammation, like blood or mucus in the stool, takes you toward the cow's milk allergy. But actually, take care. Sometimes the blood is coming from the perianal dermatitis and it's inflammatory, blood oozing from this area will come with the stool, and then you can see blood with the stool, and this is coming from the burn at the perianal area. It needs you to be very cautious. However, sometimes you can eliminate the milk, you have this improvement, and then if you are going to retry, please retry a free lactose formula, lactose-free formula. And if symptoms come again with a lactose-free formula, this is allergy. And if symptoms did not come, this is a pure case of lactose intolerance. This is a very short resume of the differences.
Yes. Since infant was in breastfeeding, any other formula may lead to interruption of breastfeeding.
The question is, introduction of a complementary feeding can decrease the breastfeeding? The answer, yes.
Yes.
But the starting point is, was it an indication, absolute indication, and the great need and the true need to give this supplement with the breastfeeding? In most of the cases I've seen, actually, it was an industrial-based pushes that introduce the formula in addition to the breastfeeding. And most of the mothers are actually wrongly interpreting the nutritional status of their infants, and they start the first heroin dose of formula. And after the first formula dose, usually the child will prefer, I divided it into beta lactose and alpha lactose. Another thing is that alpha lactose is more sweety than beta lactose. And so cow's milk-based formula are tasty more than the breast milk. So he will prefer, this is very easy. He will go to what's more tasty and he will prefer the formula. And decreasing the suckling power is another inciting factor that will decrease the breastfeeding.
Yes. Can mother drink cow milk if her baby breastfed suffering from lactose intolerance?
No problem at all, because lactose, even alpha lactose, will not remain or not reach the breast milk of the mother as alpha lactose. It is already destroyed into its basic products, which are glucose and galactose, and metabolized in the blood of the mother and tissues of the mother. And no problem for mothers having an infant with lactose intolerance to drink milk.
Yes, regarding galactosemia in breastfed baby, what is the recommended to shift to lactose free?
We said that you should use 0 lactose, and this is present in the soya formula because the already industrial cow milk-based formula may have some traces of lactose, even if they are lactose free. By definition, it is those having lactose below 0.001, and this is still is an amount of trace of lactose that can damage a galactosemic infant.
Yes, this is a question from Dr. Nagi Shuha from Alexandria.
Habibi, Dr. Nagi.
After how long a child can overcome lactose intolerance?
If it is in developmental, usually it recovers after few weeks. He will be suitable or possible he can receive a lactose formula. And if it is secondary, according to the disease, some diseases will take weeks, some others will take days, like gastroenteritis. And if it is the genetic type, congenital lactase deficiency, it will take life.
Yes. دكتور مصطفى سيرة بيسلم على حضرتك جدا، بيقول نستمتع دائما من التعلم من سيادتك.
ربنا يخليك دكتور مصطفى، تسلم.
طبعا استاذنا our dear professor Adham Hijazi. When do you treat the presence of pus cell in stool?
Actually, just the pus cells in the stool, there is accepted level, and up to 8 cells per high power field is usually accepted. A higher amount of pus cells denote inflammation, not only infection, and it may be present in very early onset IBD, in protein intolerance disorders, in infections, and you should reach a cause for these BUS cells in the stool. And the mere presence of few BUS cells in the stool does not mean anything, and it can be taken simply, not seriously.
Yes, Professor Mostafa Sir asked, is there is a precaution for doing stool pH?
Actually, in Egypt, they don't give you numbers. They give you, it's acidic. And here, as we said, it should be a quantitative measurement of the stool pH. And if you don't have this below 5.5, especially in breastfed infants, you are having no evidence at all of this lactose intolerance.
Professor May Nassar, just sending my best regard to our eminent professor. Thank you for very informative lecture. Professor Mustafa May Nassar. Can we use lactose-free formula to those patients with artificial milk and developed gastroenteritis for 2 days duration with acidic pH 5.5?
If they are breastfed and having this gastroenteritis, I will not look at the stool pH. I will look at the severity of the disease itself. If it is severe form of gastroenteritis with dehydration, with severe diarrhea, with that needed intravenous fluid therapy and hospitalization, actually I change the formula into a lactose-free formula. But if it is mild form of diarrhea, even if the pH of the stool is 5.5, I will not move to lactose-free formula.
Yes. Professor عادل رياض بيقول لحضرتك excellent as usual, dear brother.
حبيبي دكتور عادل.
Professor محمد عز الرجال, thanks Professor Mustafa for excellent presentation. Please,
محمد عز.
what is your advice for junior doctor to rush for use of lactose intolerance and stop breastfeeding?
This is one of the great catastrophes performed in our Egyptian practice. When they find a diarrhea in a breast milk fed infant, they stop breastfeeding, whether they think in cow's milk allergy or think in lactose intolerance. It's a crime when we stop the breastfeeding. And as we said, even with lactose intolerance, in my experience, I know there is no guidelines what will happen if there is lactose intolerance in the breastfed infants. But in my practice, and it works well, I ask the mother to make it small, frequent feeds rather than continuous feeding. And this breastfeeding in this pattern usually succeeded to decrease the frequency of diarrhea. And in some others, I add the lactase drops in addition to the breastfeeding, and it works in many conditions to maintain the breastfeeding. من هذه المنصة الحقيقة أنا بنبه إخواننا وحبايبنا وزمايلنا لو سمحتوا توقيف الرضاعة الطبيعي is a crime. Stopping breastfeeding is a crime, and it should be done after a team judging consulto ياخد قرار عشان يوقف الرضاعة الطبيعية. ومن الحاجات الغريبة جدا احنا بلاد الأديان اللي بتنصح بالرضاعة الطبيعي نسبة الرضاعة الطبيعي عندنا مش حلوة، بينما البلاد التانية نسبة الرضاعة الطبيعي قربت على 100% في كثير من البلدان. فيعني أرجوكم لو سمحتوا.
دكتور مصطفى سيرة بيسأل برضو نفس السؤال. In severe forms of gastroenteritis, is it preferred to use lactose-free formula even if he is breastfed?
No, it's a general rule. If anyone is breastfed, do not leave breastfeeding. Do not add something with breastfeeding, because if I'm afraid from the lactose of the breast milk, it's not a point to be afraid of, because you can divide the feeds. You can be sure that lactose intolerance in breastfed is of low magnitude than in formula fed, because of the idea that lactose is more assimilated and more easily digested.
We have a 180 دكتور مصطفى question. طبعا احنا خدنا يعني بعض الأسئلة منها. Very thankful for you. يعني شاكرين جدا سعة صدر حضرتك. Please Dr. Hania, we can join us. Professor Hania?
Of course I can join you.
Yes, thank you for all of you. Thank you for this illustrative scientific meeting.
My pleasure.
Dr. Mustafa, You have any question or any topic you can discuss with Dr. Hania?
Dr. Hania, please, you have mentioned the etiology of acute gastroenteritis, acute diarrheal illness, according to the literature. Do you think that introduction of rotavirus vaccine will lead to development of other types of viruses that can replace Rota? Because in our study, Professor May Nassar and myself, in something like 3 or 4 years, I'm not sure of the duration, that we studied what are the types of viruses. We found astrovirus is increasing. It reached about 8% of the causes of diarrhea among the samples we studied. What's your experience in a population who is vaccinated?
I think we do have some answer from studies, because if you look at the etiology of diarrhea in hospitalized children in those countries where there are high coverage with rotavirus vaccine, you see there is a shift from rotavirus to norovirus. So there is a shift, but still the number of children who are hospitalized is much lower. So it goes down, but among those which are hospitalized, there are different etiology. Of course, we will see what will happen nowadays with the COVID and with SARS-CoV-2, etc. And by the way, coronavirus, I did not mention in my table, but coronaviruses were always also among the viruses, not on the top of the list, but among the viruses which can cause diarrhea. And SARS-CoV-2 is, now we know that can give symptoms from gastrointestinal tract. So we will see what will happen.
Actually, the classic corona was number 4 after Rota, astroviruses, and the noroviruses.
But
in
other types.
Studies, it's corona was number 4.
Yeah, but there are different types of coronavirus. There is a nice review article in Pediatric Infectious Disease Journal published this week on coronaviruses, various coronaviruses. And now we are talking about SARS-CoV-2, which is a new virus, of course.
Yes.
So we cannot mix it up.
Yes.
Yes, Professor Hania. Yes, regarding Professor May Nassar, which is a famous big pediatric clinical nutrition professor in Shams, ask about regarding smectite. Can you elaborate on age limit while prescribing it?
For smectite?
Yeah.
Yeah, for smectite, there is no really age limit. However, please know that diarrhea, acute gastroenteritis, usually does not occur in neonates, as we discussed previously, or if there is diarrhea, it's usually a different cause. I don't know how it is in Egypt, it might be different, but usually it's not infectious diarrhea, but some other causes of diarrhea. But generally speaking, smectite, which is the only adsorbent which is recommended in some of the guidelines, not in all of the guidelines, and please note that universal guidelines, which are taking into account low-income countries, medium-income countries, they do not recommend, because they really want to focus on what is essential, which is rehydration and proper nutrition. So I think it's really important to underline it again and again.
Yes.
And I'm really an enthusiast of oral rehydration solution. I am really impressed by that, by the success of oral rehydration solution. And I really think that they deserve people who discovered the mechanism and those who later on introduce oral rehydration therapies, that they really deserve Nobel Prize. I'm really surprised they did not get it. You can hardly find such a successful intervention in medicine as oral rehydration, and such simple intervention.
Okay. Have you heard about the Korean recommendation of not using the smectite below the age of 2 years?
No.
South Korea.
And we are using, I mean, at least in our countries, there is no lower age limit. So, but if you are aware, so please comment on it. And we did not specify it in our ESPGHAN guidelines that there is any law.
I just received a flyer from the Pediatric Association of the South Korea, and they are not indicating, and they trying to avoid smectite of below 2 years of age.
And
I'm
the
not sure.
rationale, yeah,
They-
and the,
They don't mention what was the cause of this recommendation.
yeah.
Yes, Dr.
Well,
Mostafa. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
Professor Hania,
Yeah.
you need to talk anything?
No. I mean, I always would like to know what is the rationale behind it. We don't have, and it was not discussed when we were developing our ESPGHAN guidelines. So perhaps something new has been published, something new data are there. And then, of course, you have to modify that, that's sure. But I'm not aware of that.
It's a few weeks ago. I'm not sure why, but I think it needs to be
Yes.
revised.
Dr. Mostafa, Dr. Adel Riyad sent me the paper that we took about use of IV ondansetron orally. What do you think about this? Your opinion?
Yeah, in the meantime, when I was checking in the literature, there is indeed a paper which was published, and I even answered to the professor who asked this question.
Yes, Dr. Adel Riyad, yeah.
So yes, there is such a publication, I agree. However, in none of the guidelines I have found that this is recommended. And of course, it doesn't mean that I mean, I think it has to be repeated study or confirmed in other studies that it's really safe and efficacious. So safety and efficacy is important. But yes, the professor, yes. I don't know.
Adel Riyad. Yeah,
is correct that there is such a publication. So I really thank yes. for this comment.
Okay, fine.
But I cannot say this is currently generally recommended.
Guidelines, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Another question from Professor Tariq Barakat, Mansoura University, which is a rising star in Egypt. Which oral you mean? Which oral ondansetron you mean? Orodispersible film or orodispersible tablet or oral suspension?
Well, in my country, we have this oral dispersible tablets, so they are very easy. You just put it yes. on the tongue, and it's really yes. and it's really very.
In Egypt, in Egypt we have orodispersible film.
Yeah, I can read it from the chat and from the question that there is an oral.
Yes, we ask for the guideline. Guideline, it is orodispersible film or tablet or oral suspension.
No, the guidelines are saying oral, and it really depends on the country, what is available in your country. And yes. Oral, yeah, so it's, but the guidelines are not saying you cannot use it intravenously if you don't have it. Just use it, and you want to use it, just use the form which is available.
Yes, okay. You have
there were many questions about should we repeat the dose, etc. There are no recommendations to repeat. As a matter of fact, if you repeat the dose, you can increase the risk for adverse events. So one of the issues, you may remember, I showed you that ESPGHAN and FISPGHAN already mentioned that there are some safety issues that they would like to clarify. So I think we should really stick to this single administration, which based on the studies is a safe administration.
Yes, finally, do you have any question for Professor Mostafa, Professor Hania? You need to discuss anything about lactose intolerance?
I am also impressed at 11:30 you can still work, because I can tell you there is no way in my country that any other physician would stay until it's even quarter to the midnight. Yes, so even if I do have a question, I will not ask quarter to the midnight.
Yes, we are early now in Egypt, yeah? Early. Well, midnight is early in Egypt now, in Ramadan, yeah?
Well, you have a Ramadan, so
yes, okay.
Ramadan, so you will have. Teach me again, iftar is the proper name?
Iftar, yeah, iftar at 7 o'clock, yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Hania. Thank you, Professor Mostafa, for this illustrative scientific webinar. Thank you for all team of Egyptian Academy of Pediatrics and all team of Quartz scientific events. and the sponsoring company, which is Eva Farm. Dr. Ibrahim with us.
Thank you,
Abraham?
everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Thank you. Thank you very much.
شكرا
Thank you,
دكتور
Dr.
وائل
Mustafa.
شكرا
Yes, thank you all. I'm very proud to have you all in our webinar and looking forward for much bigger events. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Ibrahim. Thank you. Bye. Thank you.